I hate to say this, but I am legitimately curious how some people have made it as far as they have in life. Maybe they were lucky. And personally, I don't even believe in luck in the traditional sense. I do believe that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. However, for a couple that we're going to talk about today, it doesn't seem that they were prepared to have their entire vacation ruined. They would be stranded in a foreign land. We have a couple that was left by a cruise ship. There is video footage I'm going to show you guys here in just a second, because I do believe, as usual, when it comes to horrible situations like this, there is always a lesson to be learned.
Ma cosa sta dicendo? Se ne so. Ah, ho capito. Sono rimasti fuori. Sono rimasti fuori. Ma che vuol dire se volete potere?
This conundrum here allegedly took place over in Capri, Italy. This unfortunate couple here, which according to media outlets appears to be Italian natives, were set to sail on board the MSC Splendida. The ship launched in 2008, holds 3,900 passengers, well, minus two, including this couple here, and it was set to go on an itinerary around Italy, Greece, and Turkey. However, as you can see, this couple here would not make it. Before we get into, I guess, what you would call the critiques, there are two things that I want to point out here. According to media outlets like Cruise Hive, this couple was Italian natives, and they were allegedly begging the cruise ship to turn around and come back, which is impossible. I'll explain later. And just going into a little bit deeper, I looked at the itinerary. It appears that this ship is home ported over in this specific port, and well, so if that is all true, it looks like this couple missed their cruise at the very start, not even making it to the first port of call. Talk about irresponsible. One key factor that we have to point out here is that whenever you typically see anybody being late to the cruise ship, or they potentially miss the cruise ship, which is extremely horrible, I don't find it funny. Now, when they are late and they got to run for their life to make it onto the gangway before the ship leaves, that is extremely hilarious. It's like an additional show that we didn't have to pay for. However, when it comes to situations like this, usually you'll see it happen in places like the Caribbean. I am talking about, of course, your Cozumels. People go over to Mr. Sancho's, or they go just drink till their heart's content all day, buy those $3 shots, and well, it is somewhat understandable. Not excusable, it is understandable how these things can happen at such a high rate, because let's be honest, people being late to the cruise ship is not uncommon. Missing the cruise ship is potentially another situation. Aside from the typical cruises that you typically see sailing out of the US and going to places like Cozumel in Nassau, Bahamas, you go over to Europe where you see a lot of cool itineraries. There are more ports of call, and you're typically staying there a lot longer. I would also like to add that as somebody that has been all over cruises in Europe for the past couple weeks, I just disembarked Norwegian Cruise Line's newest ship, the Norwegian Viva. And well, when you go over to these ports, I'm not saying they're not as exciting as the Caribbean, but the dynamic is a little different. There's a lot of history, there's a lot of walking around. But as far as the drinks and whatnot, it is a little bit more casual than you going to a bar, yelling, screaming, getting drunk, and just having these kind of memories. You can do it as, for example, one of our ports of calls is over in Ibiza, and well, I went to a little area and we paid for some drinks and we had a great time. However, I do believe that whether you are sailing in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, you do have to be responsible, and there's some people that I guess apparently just can't do that. In the video, you do see passengers recording the couple that is yelling and screaming, essentially begging the cruise ship to turn around and come back because it's maybe a couple feet or yards away from just docking back into the port. You would think this would be a simple process, just reverse the thrusters and go ahead and park all over again and bring the staff back out. It doesn't exactly work like that. The cruise ship industry, just like the airline industry, is on a very tight, strict schedule. That port over there in Italy is also very busy. There are other ships that are coming in and going out. You also, of course, have to take into consideration the docking fees. It costs money for the cruise ship to just park over in the port. The only time it's really ever been an exception was later on in the pandemic. Miami had a nice deal with the cruise lines and they were able to dock there for free. Did them a massive favor. But the cost could go anywhere from hundreds of thousands up to millions for cruise ships to park for a certain point a time over in these ports. By the time you bring the ship back and you bring the staff back out to tie the ship down and get the gangway back out and set it up, it costs a lot of money. And I do seriously doubt that any cruise line, any company or port of call terminal are willing to pay thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if that, in order to get two people back on board a cruise ship that were just simply irresponsible and thinking that they own the world, or at least in this case, the cruise ship, and it can do everything they say at their beck and call. Whenever you are left by a cruise ship, it can, of course, be problematic, especially if you are in a foreign port. Typically, whenever you're left, there is going to be a representative or an agent at that specific port to help guide you. Should you need to go to an embassy or you need to get taken to the airport, you, of course, will be fronting the cost for all of this. And even if you have travel insurance, depending on the situation and what type of coverage you may have, it may not help you out in this specific situation. Of course, there are other factors like if you have your passport and where you are coming from, what visas you also may have available to you at that point in time. Considering the fact, though, in this particular situation that these poor devils are native to Italy, it should be no problem. They may be able to just go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to go back home, or we're going to stay here for the week until the cruise ship comes back, and then we'll go ahead and figure it out. They could also go to the next port of call, considering all of this is also all EU. Even if they don't have a passport and they left it on board the ship, whatever the case may be, they are still going to be good, and this should be a very simple process, other than the fact that, well, they have potentially lost some money on their cruise, and it's also a little embarrassing as well. And by a little, I do mean a lot. As we wrap this video up here, I'd also like to give a little piece of advice to my primarily American audience. If you ever decide to go over to Europe and you go to Italy specifically, the first time I went to Italy was back when I worked for the Harlem Globetrotters 7 years ago. I was a tour manager. I was in charge of essentially being the babysitter, glorified babysitter for 7-foot-tall, 30-year-old children, and we had to go from arena to arena. I learned very quickly that over in Italy, and this is nothing against the people over there at all, just assume that from the infrastructure over there to the taxi rides and just how people are going to organize, things are not going to run on time. You will notice that over there are things that shut down. People go to lunch. They just kind of, well, live a very different lifestyle than compared to what you know over in the United States. Things are just very chill. Just have the understanding if you're going there for business or you need to be on time somewhere, you should plan out in advance. I would also argue that you should always just be punctual, really, no matter where you are or where it is that you have to go. If it is, of course, something as serious as you boarding a cruise ship or a special meeting. You get what I'm saying. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. I do still have videos coming up, like my very thorough in-depth review of my time on board the brand new Norwegian Viva. Check out my full cruise ship tour up here if you guys are interested. Also, I have another video coming up, my review on my time on board the Carnival Pro. I got to get to all that. I have a lot of traveling coming up, but I'll get to it as soon as possible. I appreciate you guys. I love all of you, and well, I'll see you later. Take it easy.